Now let me read the NPR. NPR said, it sounds like Chappelle is using white privilege to excuse his homophobia and transphobia. Wait, now Dave Chappelle can have white privilege? I'm really confused now. I thought I would get you on, even though that's going to be the subject of my editorial next week, because it's, I think, a much bigger subject than just this, but this gets at it. Words have meaning, but not anymore. That's what bothers me to begin with, that there is just, this is what I call the one true opinion. Very apropos of your religion theme, John. Mm-hmm. There is the one true opinion, and there isn't. There isn't just one true opinion. I'm a free speech guy. Now, I'm Team Dave, but that doesn't mean I'm anti-trans. We can have two thoughts in our head at the same time. Am I right about that? I hope.
It's a strange moment when NPR can seriously accuse Dave Chappelle, a black comedian from Washington, D.C., who has spent decades dissecting race, identity, and society, of somehow wielding white privilege, a claim so absurd it almost feels like satire, yet here we are. In his latest special, Chappelle does what he has always done: push boundaries, mock cultural buzzwords, and provoke uncomfortable conversations, which predictably sent activists, media outlets, and self-appointed moral referees into a frenzy, branding him transphobic, homophobic, and now supposedly privileged. Bill Maher stepped in to defend him, cutting to the heart of the issue by pointing out that words no longer mean what they used to, having been reduced to emotional weapons rather than precise language. Maher argued that disagreement is no longer allowed without being labeled hatred, that simply questioning an idea now earns someone a phobic tag, even though phobia once referred to an actual disagreeing with someone is not the same as hating them, and when society blurs that distinction, it starts to lose its grip on reality. That's why statements like, "This is not a debate with two sides," echoed by some of Chappelle's critics and former Netflix employees, are so revealing, because the moment one side declares discussion over, reason quietly exits the room.
Words have meaning, but not anymore. And when I hear transphobic, phobic has a meaning. Fear. I'm not transphobic if I merely disagree with you. It's not hate. I mean, here's what one of the reactions from someone who worked at Netflix said: this is not an argument with two sides. Well, right away you lost me.
Paradoxically, it's becoming less of a political movement and more of a religion. There are sacred words, unassailable dogmas, and heretics who must be banished for having the audacity to challenge the faith. Maher is not against transsexual individuals. He does not oppose anyone, even though he does support Dave. All he's saying is what most reasonable people think. We have the capacity to consider two things simultaneously. Even if you support transgender rights, you may still think that some aspects of gender ideology are ambiguous, shifting, or controversial. The two items do not contradict with one another. But to the contemporary activist class, nuance is heresy. You either agree or disagree with every word, phrase, and philosophy. The crowd also doesn't quit until you're done.
You know, you're not automatically right if you're trans. You're completely equal. You're just not automatically right. And it doesn't behoove everybody to get their mind around very new changes. I mean, we were boy and girl for a very long time. It's only been 10 years since, how long have we had gay marriage? You know, I mean, talking about the Democratic voter, I'm sure there's a guy in Ohio going, I just got on board with gay marriage. Could you give me a minute? This idea that we're not any gender when we're born is very new and very radical. That you're born is just jumping off.
Remember, it was only about a decade ago that gay marriage became legal nationwide. So when someone in Ohio says, hey, give me a minute to process all this new stuff, that isn't hatred. It's being human. People need time to adjust, and social change doesn't move at the speed of hashtags. Maher joked about the guy who said, I just got on board with gay marriage. Can you give me a second? And it lands because it's true. You can't instantly overwrite centuries of social understanding and expect universal fluency overnight. That doesn't mean progress should stop. Of course not. Empathy and compassion matter, and transgender people absolutely deserve equality, safety, and happiness. But demanding instant acceptance of every new term, rule, or reinterpretation without question isn't growth, it's pressure. When disagreement is treated as hostility, Real understanding breaks down, people shut up instead of talking, and humor, the last refuge of honest speech, gets treated like a crime scene. Comedy isn't meant to indoctrinate, it's meant to test ideas, poke assumptions, and say the quiet parts out loud. The moment comedians start asking, is this safe to say? We lose something essential, which is why the Chappelle controversy isn't just about jokes, it's about freedom.
I'm not sure I'm down with all of it, and I don't have to be.
But Dave wasn't battling power differentials. He wasn't immediately on board, and that person from Ohio needs to do some learning and some adjustment.
Yes.
But that means that you are a heretic and you have to be pushed out a window because you are not battling the power differentials. And what you see is that there's one thing this is. These people who do this about race, who do this about trans, who do this about anything, think of themselves as ahead of the curve. They think of themselves as indicating some sort of higher wisdom. Really, it's a very simple way of looking at things. People like this, no matter what they're arguing on the basis of, are telling us the way you would have thought of it when you were 5 years old is the proper way to think of it. That doesn't work. Never will.
Bill says this is where it gets genuinely funny. In an NPR article, supposedly the home of serious educated journalism, Maher noted that Chappelle was accused of abusing white privilege to justify homophobia and transphobia, and that's the moment the entire conversation collapses under its own weight. If Dave Chappelle can somehow benefit from white privilege, then the term has lost all meaning, and the so-called woke lexicon has started eating itself. When words like privilege and phobia are used as weapons instead of tools for understanding, they stop clarifying anything and start silencing people. It becomes linguistic chaos dressed up as moral virtue. Ironically, the loudest voices online claiming oppression are often the least affected by it. Maher even brought up Latinx, a label studies show most Hispanic Americans don't use or even like, yet activists keep pushing it as if they're rescuing an entire community. That's the real problem here. This isn't about helping people. It's about moral posturing. It's about looking enlightened, feeling revolutionary, and speaking for groups that never asked for the help in the first place.
Latinx. I don't have any problem with Latinx, but it doesn't seem to be making any inroads into the communities where most Latinx people live. And so you have this sort of educated dialect way of thinking.
These so-called progressives think they are on the cutting edge, but in actuality, they are thinking like 5-year-olds, emotionally rather than logically. They see the world in sharp contrasts, oppressor versus oppressed, good versus evil. It's moral simplicity disguised as complication. McWhorter's elaboration on that was excellent. He underlined that while discussions about gender can evolve, biological sex cannot be easily altered by society with new vocabulary.
I think, to get back to this simplicity idea, they see that Dave Chappelle is a comedian. There are layers of wit and irony and attitude going on. And instead, we're told to just read it as if it was the Three Bears, and we're being told that that's sophisticated, when really that means that these people who are, so annoyed that anybody says some words or expresses some ideas are saying that most of America aren't sophisticated. And yet, last time I checked, they were arguing on the basis of disempowered people.
Or that there's a
That's all it needs. Let's talk about the audience now that this section has covered everything. On Rotten Tomatoes, Chappelle's show had a 95% audience rating, but a 43% reviewer score. That gap reveals the whole narrative.
Being a comedian seems like a really, really tough job. I think we can agree that comedians' primary role is to entertain, and it's sometimes to make us think. But no one thinks it's a comedian's role to tell us how to think or what to think. And attributing that role to Dave or any other comedian doesn't serve art, the artist, or society at all.
Well, I was going to read some of these reviews. I'm just going to read this one from NPR. It's because the reviews from the critics, some at variance with the audience. Rotten Tomatoes, that's a amalgam of reviews. I think in this case 7. His special got a 43%. Audience 95. Says a lot.
This is because viewers can tell when someone is telling the truth. They perceive sincerity. On the other hand, critics often write for their employer's ideological standards or, worse, for each other. Art is no longer the focus. It has to do with optics. Boardrooms and newsrooms are not places to find humor. It exists in the space between a comedian and their audience. If the crowd laughed, the show was successful. That's what matters, not an NPR think piece or a Rotten Tomatoes rating of 43%. The awakening outrage machine is fueled by misunderstandings. There must be disagreement for it to exist. If people actually started talking, listening, and showing consideration for one another.
That there's a connection, that because you don't agree with what he said, which again, I don't think is transphobic. A lot of the special is about how he has this friendship with a trans person who is his opening act. But that it's going to lead to violence. Now, there has been an uptick in violence, as there was with Asian Americans in the last couple of years. Of course, we condemn this. Of course, we should do everything we can to stop it. But I don't think Dave Chappelle...
The outrage economy would collapse overnight. They keep the temperature high so that no one ever feels comfortable enough to talk freely. Because of this, it's significant in ways that go beyond humor. Because someone as untouchable as Dave Chappelle can accuse anyone of having white privilege. What happens if a discussion escalates into hate speech? If a scientist presents data that offends someone, should they be fired? Is it necessary to rewrite books that don't employ the newest acceptable language? Eventually, we have to draw a line between respect and submission. Treating someone with dignity is a sign of respect. Submission is either adhering to or not adhering to any new regulations that are developed the following week. Maher did a fantastic job summarizing it at the conclusion. I'm Team Dave, but that doesn't mean I'm anti-trans, he said. We have the capacity to consider two things simultaneously. That's all. That is the message. It is both possible and necessary to keep people apart from ideologies. You can love and support your trans friends, coworkers, and neighbors while challenging the cultural excesses associated with the movement. You can support Chappelle's right to joke around while also promoting kindness and inclusivity.
That's what bothers me to begin with, that there is this is what I call the one true opinion. Very apropos of your religion theme, John. There is the one true opinion, and there isn't. There isn't just one true opinion. I'm a free speech guy. Now, I'm Team Dave, but that doesn't mean I'm anti-trans. We can have two thoughts in our head at the same time. Am I right about that? I hope.
But there's only one truth.
Disagreement does not equal.
Questioning ideas is not the same as denying someone's humanity, and in healthy, developed cultures, debate is normal while fragile ones feel the need to punish it because free speech, comedy, and open conversation are not acts of violence but signs of life. Proof that people still care enough to talk, argue, and even laugh together. When that disappears, growth disappears with it. Instead of trying to silence comedians for doing what they've always done, maybe the focus should be on the larger message they're pointing toward, because as long as we're still capable of holding multiple thoughts at once, there's hope. If you've made it this far, you clearly value independent thinking and honest dialogue. So share your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Do you think Chappelle went too far, or are people simply too sensitive now? Let's talk about it openly, respectfully, and maybe even with a sense of humor, because laughter might be one of the last truly authentic things we have left.